A group of baboons, I don't know what you call them, a group, a tribe, a gaggle, maybe a murder or whatever, had come from the nearby forest to the watering hole. Thirst had drawn them from the safety of the forest. The camera focused on one female with a baby baboon dangling from her breast, its little arms and legs wrapped around its mommy's torso. As the mother approached the edge of the water to get a drink, a crocodile sprang from the murky water and grabbed hold of the mother. It took a fraction of a second for the mother to free herself. She thrashed about wildly and struck the crocodile's snout several times before she was able to pull herself from its mouth. She pulled herself away and scurried up the muddy embankment. The camera zoomed in on her left arm as it dangled by her side. A fractured piece of bone protruded through the blood-matted fur on the inside of her upper arm. The emotionless narrator observed that the baboon mother's baby was gone. The camera panned back around to the crocodile backing into the water, its teeth locked on the infant's head, with its limp body being dragged along the ground. The narrator reasoned that the young crocodile would not re-enter the water completely, for fear that the larger animals in the water would steal his meal from him. So he remained on the bank, his prize in his mouth, trying to decide what to do next. Suddenly, a larger male baboon, having witnessed the attack, leapt upon the crocodile's head and began to rain blows down upon it in a desperate attempt to get the reptile to release the infant. After a few seconds of this, the crocodile decided that this small bite was not worth the trouble and released it before slipping once more into the murky water. The large baboon scooped up the limp body of the wounded baby and scampered up the embankment. As the male tried to coax the infant to its feet, the narrator informed the audience that his efforts were in vain. The child was mortally wounded and would die soon from his injuries. The camera zoomed in once more, this time focusing on the profile of the baby. Its little mouth opened and closed as it gasped its final breaths. The large male picked up the body and ran away into the nearby tree line, out of the frame. I had suddenly become acutely aware that my son had not stirred in some time. Or at least, I hadn't heard anything on the monitor. I had purposely placed the transmitter near the crib and could usually hear him breathing while he slept. At that moment, I could not hear him at all. I panicked and jumped out of bed and I ran to my son's room. In the dark, I could tell he was still lying on his back, in his crib, just as I had placed him, but I could not see any movement in him. I did not want to wake him, but I had to make sure that he was all right. New parents are always haunted by the stories of babies just being found dead in their cribs with no apparent cause of death, or worse still, having the death caused by something that they had done with good intention, but ultimately was in poor judgment, like leaving a favorite toy in the crib. All of this raced through my mind as I looked at his motionless little body in the dark. I tried to listen for the sounds of his breathing. Nothing. The crib rails prevented me from placing my ear close enough to be sure. I placed my hand on his chest and felt it rise and fall rhythmically against my palm. Satisfied that he was asleep and not in any present danger of SIDS or crocodiles, I returned to my room to contemplate how much having a son had changed me. Of course, my thoughts were short-lived as my son soon woke up and I resorted once again to my role as baby life support system. Now my son is almost 3 and he is no longer that screaming, pooping, eating, non-sleeping machine. Now he is a little person. A person you can play with, teach, and learn with. You can even reason with him and sometimes Jedi mind trick him. Even my daughter, just over a year, is less a responsibility and more her own little entity. She has recently entered this cuddling phase, which is very cute. This brings us up to date. I'm still working in law and my wife is a healthcare executive. We do all right for ourselves. We have a nice house in the burbs now. We take our yearly vacations to someplace warm. We have the usual yuppie trappings, relatively nice cars and a flat screen TV, and of course, all the debt to go along with it. We attend church on Sundays, donate to charities, and pay our taxes. Not that this makes us any different from about a million other families across the country. Despite all we have, there's one thing that no matter what we do, we never seem to have enough of. No, I am not talking about money. For once, I am talking about something even more valuable. I'm talking about time. There simply is not enough time in the day. Not enough time for me, not enough time for my wife, not enough time for my kids, not enough time for life. If we didn't have to work so much, we could have more time to enjoy life and make it more worthwhile. The idle rich, we all know who I mean. They are those that we are not. These people who seemingly do nothing, vocationally I mean, and seem to have all the time in the world with which to attempt to outspend their seemingly unlimited supply of money. Of course, popular media makes these people seem to be much more common than they actually are, but rest assured they are out there. These people are invariably very rich, most of the time became so simply by being born to the right people at the right time. Obviously, there's nothing I can do about that. I came from where I came from. Luckily, this is not the only way to become idle rich. I was just reading the most recent Forbes list of the richest people in the world. There's a billionaire on the list who is, get this, an author. She, and again I'm purposely being vague here to protect the innocent, but I'm sure you can guess who I'm talking about, wrote a book, a children's fantasy. She wrote it while living off of public assistance. Now, after writing a series of children's fantasy books centered around one lovable character that eventually became multiple movies and a huge merchandise enterprise, she is a billionaire. I could do that. Imagine how great that would be. I must sound selfish, right? I'm not denying it. The truth of the matter is I am, but fortunately, here my motives are not entirely so. I mentioned the idle rich above. Don't get me wrong, I have no intention of striking it rich and then becoming some rich socialite. If I was successful, you would not be able to find me binge drinking at swanky Hollywood clubs and having my name plastered on the covers of gossip rags. Quite the contrary. Let me refer back to the guy that is responsible for all this in the first place. No, I'm not talking about me, for once. I'm talking about the unnamed author that I mentioned back at the beginning. After he wrote the book that set him up for life, you know what he did? He disappeared from public life. He retired to some rural New England community where he could disappear from the world and spend time doing what mattered most to him. In his case, it appears that what mattered most to him were young women and strange religions. In my case, financial independence would give me time and resources that I need to be the father and the husband that I want to be. Imagine a father who didn't have to work, who was never too tired from the office to play with you. He was never too stressed to have fun, and was always there to make sure there weren't any crocodiles lurking under your bed. Imagine growing up in a household like that. Imagine a husband that didn't have to spend long hours at the office or go away for extended periods of time on business. A husband that was always available. Imagine not having to compete with his career for his focus and attention. Can you imagine? I can. That's why I am doing this. I am doing this to provide my children with the father they deserve and my wife with the husband she should have had. Now, you can feel free to judge.